power that define our contemporary world. So today I just want to run through some of those themes in the hopes of maybe making the meta story of this conflict a bit clearer. But please keep in mind that I'm going to be primarily talking about the perspectives of people who are located outside of Israel, Palestine itself. Obviously, the passions of people whose lives and families are directly affected by the violence of the conflict don't require any great analysis to understand. It is why everyone else cares that I think is the more interesting question to explore. Okay, so one big reason is the America angle. Israel is a strong ally of the United States, the most powerful country in the world. It has become a stronger and stronger US ally over the course of the last few decades, receiving a lot of American military and financial support, and is generally a cooperative and supportive strategic partner to the United States in the Middle East. As a younger man, President Biden once quipped that if Israel didn't exist,
were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region.
And all this means that people's opinions on Israel are often heavily bound up in what they think about US foreign policy more broadly, and even the United States itself. If you think that US foreign policy is generally respectable and America is a country that is broadly motivated by the pursuit of global peace and stability and freedom, then Israel is easily defended as an important assistant in pursuing these goals. This tends to be the disposition of people on the center or center-right of Western politics, who are generally deferential to American geopolitical leadership. However, if you think that US foreign policy, and the US in general, is mostly a force of war, exploitation, and authoritarianism in the world, then you tend to see Israel as just another odious American-backed regime committing human rights abuses with Washington's active knowledge and consent. The harshest critics of US foreign policy tend to be found on the further left end of the political spectrum, both in the developing world and the Western world. This has been the case since at least the Cold War, when a certain left-wing argument was popularized, positing that American foreign policy consistently favored the rich and powerful over the weak and oppressed. Since Israel is a rich and powerful nuclear-armed nation-state and the Palestinians are poor and stateless, it is not difficult to fit their conflict into this frame and judge America for siding with those who need less help. A similar but distinct phenomenon is the idea of understanding the Israeli-Palestinian situation through the lens of anti-imperialism. This is the idea that relations between countries is fundamentally defined by an exploiter versus exploited dynamic, in which one group of people conquer, oppress, and subordinate another group of people for their own benefit. Often, these are people who would otherwise have nothing to do with each other. One group simply wants to take something that the other group has, usually resources or land. The decision to conquer, in turn, is often informed by racism and prejudice. One group sees the other as inherently inferior to themselves, therefore making conquering and exploiting them no big deal. In the eyes of some of the people who believe imperialism to be the primary explanation of how foreign relations operate, the founding of the State of Israel in 1948 is seen as basically an imperial exercise. Israel is depicted as the creation of European Jews who migrated to the Middle East, displacing the native Palestinians, taking their land and making them into a second-tier class of person. A lot of Israelis heavily dispute this characterization of the creation of their country, but we're talking about a lot of disputable arguments today. Many of the people who have been protesting on behalf of Palestinians lately have been using words like decolonize and settler, which are terms that evoke the idea that Israel is akin to a European colony or empire. A lot of these people are fond of calling Israel an apartheid state as well, which is a reference to the system of extreme racial segregation imposed on the black people of South Africa by its small white minority who were the descendants of Europeans who had moved to Africa over the course of the previous 3 centuries. The political leadership of the Palestinians, for its part, has been very keen to present itself to the world as leaders of an anti-colonial resistance. The late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, in particular, put a lot of effort into forging alliances with other world leaders who define their politics as being part of an anti-imperialist struggle, including Nelson Mandela, Fidel Castro, and the communist rulers of Vietnam. And this remains a very popular way of looking at Israel in significant parts of the global south to this day, often in Muslim countries, but notably also in certain countries with far left governments like Venezuela and Bolivia.
The youth in Venezuela, the youth in Iran must know that the world of the future will be a just world without imperialism.
As well as among students, academics, and other activists who have made anti-imperial or anti-colonial theory central to their worldview. All right, now let us talk about the big one. Anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is irrational hatred of Jewish people. It has been called mankind's oldest prejudice and has been around in some form or another for hundreds, if not thousands of years, overlapping with the long history of the Jewish people themselves. In modern times, we tend to think of anti-Semitism as having a fundamentally conspiratorial character, which is to say it posits Jews as having a lot of secret power over everything behind the scenes, and using this power to be deliberately evil and selfish. The existence of the State of Israel has accordingly been incorporated into a lot of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, claiming that, the Israeli government has made puppets out of all the world leaders, and that there's some sort of giant conspiracy between Jewish politicians and journalists to spread pro-Israeli propaganda to the masses. And if your worldview posits that Jews are inherently bad, sinister people, then you'll logically support anything that helps weaken or destroy the world's only majority Jewish country. In the 20th century, we came to associate anti-Semitism with right-wing politics, in part because the most viciously anti-Semitic government of that century was right-wing, and in fact explicitly demonized left-wing politics as a manifestation of the supposed Jewish plot to ruin everything. In many Muslim countries, right-wing anti-Semitism is still common and is often bound up in conservative religious and nationalistic attitudes. But in Western countries, it is becoming increasingly common to argue that anti-Semitism is becoming more of a left-wing thing. The argument goes something like this. As Christian and conservative arguments in favor of Israel, which we will discuss later, have proven quite persuasive to people on the center-right, right-wing anti-Semitism has become an increasingly fringe movement in the West. At the same time, however, the rising popularity of anti-Israel arguments on the left, like the anti-American and anti-imperial ones we mentioned, have made anti-Semitism at least more theoretically compatible with the agenda of some of the more strident left-wing factions. Attempting to distinguish anti-Semitic arguments against Israel from fair and non-prejudicial ones is something that a lot of people spend a lot of time fighting about these days. All right, now let us talk about the War on Terror. So the War on Terror is a term associated with the defining theme of American, Western, and in some ways global foreign policy in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, in which Islamic fundamentalists leveled the World Trade Center buildings in New York City, killing thousands. Those attacks really heightened global awareness of radical Islamic fundamentalism and made Islamic fundamentalists seem more unsympathetic and dangerous than ever before. Eliminating the violent threat posed by Islamic fundamentalist terrorists became a huge international priority, with a lot of people viewing this group as the biggest organized threat to world peace and security in the 21st century. This fear only increased following other Islamist terrorist attacks in other countries after 9/11, making the global war on terror truly feel global. And this in turn helped make the situation in Israel-Palestine easier to understand for a lot of people who had previously not paid that much attention to it. Palestinians are overwhelmingly Muslim, with a sizable community of Muslim fundamentalists as well. The Palestinian terrorist groups that stage attacks against Israelis are all generally led by Muslim fundamentalists. And this fact has helped make the